Welcome. Today we're talking to Marc Alvarez. He's the owner of Ember Restaurant located on the island of Anguilla in the British West Indies. And I am virtually sitting on Marc's patio. So Marc, welcome. I'm excited you're here and I can't wait to hear more about Ember.
Well, Ember kind of started when I first lived down here in 1996. I didn't know anything about Anguilla, and I came down as the chef at Cove Castles. And within 2 weeks, I was chosen and moved down here blindly. As I got to know the island and the people and the way of cooking, one of the first things that sort of like spearheaded Ember was when I was given my first local charcoal grill and how they cook with the local charcoal. And I've always enjoyed cooking like that. So we dragged this to the beach and set up the grill and cook all the time for Sunday fun days. And then when I went back to New York and we were living in Westchester, I always had my Weber grill. And whether it snowed, rained, whatever, I was always out there grilling. And my neighbors thought I was crazy. So the fun part of it was, and a friend of mine had a restaurant in New York called Peasants, Frankie DiCarlo. And I worked with him a little bit to see what they were doing, and I always liked the concept. So when I came back to Anguilla, it was always my goal to set up a wood-fired kitchen, hence the name Ember.
All right, I love it. So I know you came there at first for a chef's position, but how on earth, what made you decide to apply for that?
I was working in New York as a young chef de cuisine, and I was kind of like burnt out, tired, and I wanted to have a change of pace. And like 2 months prior, it's kind of weird. I had a strange dream that I saw these giant white houses, kind of curved buildings on the beach and the sea. And then when I came down and I applied for Cove Castles, I realized that was what I saw in my dream. And it's just kind of ironic how I came down here to do that.
I love that. So when did you actually know that food was your thing, that was what you were going to do with your career?
When I was 16 years old, I got a job in a restaurant as a dishwasher, and I was watching the line and kind of enjoyed what was going on. And there was an opening on the hotline. I said, teach me, I can do this. And I was doing it ever since. And then, I worked through various stations and then learned a little bit of the front of the house because the restaurant in Westchester turned into a sort of like a bar club on the weekends. And then so I learned how to bar back, learned how to DJ, cocktail waiter, things like that. And once I figured it out where to go to school, I applied to the Culinary Institute of America. I took a year off after I graduated high school just to garner a little more experience. And, I went to CIA, and then I got some really good externships and worked with some great chefs in New York.
Wow, you've done a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what is challenging about having the restaurant on the island? I would think there would be some unique challenges with that.
Well, a lot of stuff that we bring in is we have to get in on containers. So if there's a holiday on a Monday, I'm kind of stuck with what I can get my hands on, and I've got to wait till it gets unloaded. If it makes it, it doesn't make it. So this is a chef down here. You have to be sort of like fluid.
Yeah.
To adapt to what you can get your hands on. During high season, the seas are rough, you get ground seas, so it's difficult to get snapper, crayfish, lobster, things like that. But and sometimes the labor can be a challenge because it's a different work ethic, and getting people to work like I do is sometimes can be challenging. And I have a good crew, a good team I work with, and it took a while to build it to that point, but I think it's actually really good.
Good. Well, what do you make that you get the most compliments on?
Let's see what people love the most. They love my short ribs. They love the suckling pig when I had it on the menu. The octopus, just sell a ton of. And then, of course, always, people always associate wood oven with when you do pizzas. And I do pizzas once a week. In the beginning, I had it on the menus regularly, but it was just taking up too much space in the ovens and slowing down service, so I had to remove it. But I'll run them on Fridays on occasion, and it takes me 3 days to make the dough.
Wow, tell me about that.
Well, the dough is I use a combination of flours, and then sorry, my gentleman's delivering my cold. Thanks, Gary. Thank you. combination of flours, and then you have to work with the temperature in the room, the hydration of the flour, how much moisture it has, because it does come in refrigerated containers. I try to get it a desired dough temperature of around 78, 79. So I have to make sure may factor in the flour temperature. So I'll chill it to make sure the water's cold enough. Do what they call as an auto-elise. You mix a portion of the flour with all the flour and the yeast with the water, and then you sort of like let it sit for like an hour. It's, an hour is best, where it hydrates itself, and then you turn the mixer back on. Then you add the salt. Then you add the rest of your water, a little double hydration as much as you need. And then you let it slowly ferment, bulk ferment on the table, covered, of course. And I do a series of folds to build gluten strength. And at that point, I'll scale it out, put it in the fridge, and it'll slowly ferment over the next couple of days before I use it.
And I'm guessing you're putting exactly that kind of love and care into everything you're making.
Absolutely. I do a lot of, I always look at stuff. And then when I change menus, which I do religiously, I look at things and I'm going, okay, not happy with this. Let's change this. Let's change that, to make it obviously for, speed in the kitchen, ways that people enjoy it. And it's ironic. I don't really sit down and taste my dishes as they come out. Like, I taste everything, sauces and everything like this, but I do not taste like a full plated dish. I sort of put flavor profiles together. I know it tastes good. And when people go, wow, this is fantastic, I'm like, okay, I can do this. And then if I sit down, if I see a problem with it, I'll sit down and actually taste the entire dish and say, okay, it needs a little balance of this, balance of that.
All right.
And that just takes years of experience.
Yeah. I can't, I don't think that's something I could ever do, is just come up with recipes. I don't invent recipes. So just the idea of coming up with it and then finding those balances is such an interesting process.
And you want to have you want to have a nice balance on a dish. I mean, obviously you want something that's, cooked perfectly. You want a nice sauce, but it's not too rich, but you want balance with acidity, something that's salty, some things that have crunchiness to it, herbaceous with the different herbs that you put into it. So it always flavors. You always build flavors. It's just hard to throw things in at the last minute. So, but, properly, let's say chicken, for instance. We'll make the potato gratin and basically have that. And that's one of my biggest sellers because people love that. It's a comfort dish. And, you take the time to cook the potato gratin and, bake it off. And then you have the chicken that's, it's cooked on the brick in the wood oven. So you get that flavor of the smoke, it's seasoned with salt and fresh cracked pepper. And then you have the sauce that you do with the bones and white wine and rosemary and garlic to give it that accent. And then we do the corn pudding that, we grate off the cob like New England style, and then cook that down with onions and a little bit of milk. And then you add that to the spinach, and then the whole dish comes together so it eats well.
Nice. That potato gratin was life-changing. It was so good. And it wasn't even something we had originally thought we would eat, but you brought that out and we tried it, and we all just loved every bite. It was so good.
Thank you.
Anyway, don't take that one off the menu.
No, I'll always keep that. I'll always keep that because people, they like that. So
yes,
I've added it onto different dishes. Always people who order a steak, they'll have that as well.
Yeah, awesome. Let's see. What is the favorite dish you've ever had that you did not make?
Favorite dish that I ever had that I did not make. I'm a big fan of Japanese food, and one of my always go-to when I go to restaurants is I always love the nabiyaki udon, which is the udon noodles in a broth with the poached egg, the tempura shrimp, the fish cake, and everything else. And it's such a comforting dish that I've always, I judge that. I mean, one of my first experiences with especially, other cultural foods, when we used to go to a Chinese restaurant where we lived, and it was the first time I ever tasted like a wonton soup, which I'm another huge fan of. And to have it with the fried shallots in there and a nice broth. And to this day, I can never find that because I think people just mass produce food and do it, especially on this island. I mean, Chinese food can be so good on this island, but they just kind of put it together and they just, I guess they just cater it towards the palates of everybody else around and don't do the traditional stuff. And I was fortunate enough to work with some Chinese chefs in New York.
Okay.
So you get to see the really good, how things are done and how everything works out.
Good deal. Any other food travels, food adventures that you've had?
When I worked for Danny Meyer at the MoMA, and I was opening up the cafes over there, I was sent to Rome to go experience all the different foods, and it was interesting to see how the simplicity of what the Romans did with the food, and especially with things like pastas and the cured meats and the cheeses. And it's like, it's a firm belief. You just need a really good product, and you need to do minimal stuff to it just to keep it on the plate. When you start taking things and then people start going, okay, I want this, I want that. Put this on this to dumb it up. It's, as a chef, you have to take things like, I like doing charcuterie. So when you take a pig, instead of throwing the head away and throwing the liver away, you're making liver pate, you're making head cheese, you're making all this stuff. I mean, it's easy to slap, some foie gras on the plate with their lobsters and say, look this, but it's the true art to take the stuff that people would get rid of and use that to make, a fantastic dish.
And
again, it's like, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I take it that has influenced what you do.
Yeah, and I try to work with stuff like with our local farmers. I'll go to the restaurants and I go to the farm and I'll see things in the ground that I know that I want to use. And they're like, really? People use that? I'm like, yep. So I give them another medium of what to work with and something that gives them an idea that they can sell. And, I try to use as much as local now. It's like the tomatoes. It's funny because now we're hitting the peak of summer. Going to be hitting the peak of summer soon. And, tomatoes are starting to stop growing on the island because it's getting too hot. So the flowers are falling. You get a little bit here and there, but it's at a point where I just started to remove it from the menu because, again, hurricane season's coming up. It's getting too hot. And then the guys don't want to grow anything and lose their crop. So, and that'll start back up in probably like November when we'll start getting tomatoes again. Okay.
Interesting. So on the note of ingredients, what is the most underrated ingredient?
On this island, underrated?
Or anywhere underrated?
No, that's a tough question to me because I'm so used to using everything I get my hands on. Obviously people don't like, I think people use spices, but, they don't use them the way they do. But if you study Indian cuisine, you see how assertive they are with the spices and stuff like this. And again, it's just the balance and unison with the ingredients. People don't like certain things like, I would say like certain lettuces where I would take and I would grill, which would give another, flavor profile to that. And people can sit there and go, well, cabbage and turnips and things like that. They're underrated because people, they don't want to use that. Everybody wants asparagus. They want fresh peas. They want this. But you have to go with the seasons of what's available and how you can transform these dishes.
Yeah, I get that. What do you wish people knew about Anguilla?
Well, I mean, the fact besides the type of food that I do, because it's, it's always fun that, it's a new place. And I think it kind of works itself in there. I get a strong word of mouth. And then, you always have to rely on the hotels with the concierges to sit there and say, hey, we need to, try Ember, try this, try that. And then some people, sometimes you don't get that, but then also they never hear about it. So you try to put it out as much as possible. And then that and experiencing, there's lots of other fish on this island that I start to experiment with. And then it's hard sell to some of the guests because it's not snapper, it's not grouper, it's not mahi-mahi, it's not lobster, it's not this. People go, why don't you do salmon? I said, well, I'll do salmon. It's because it's not Caribbean. But, I can, you get certain people that's all they eat for fish. So you want to, so then, today I got, yesterday I picked up a fish. They call it a Spanish snapper. But in hindsight, the real name for it is called blue runner, or they call them, the large whitebacks. And it's sort of like the texture of bonito, and it's actually really, really good. It's just, getting people to try that out. It's like a little tough. They have the, what's the other fish that's really good here that people don't try is they call it the old wife, which is triggerfish. And
Oh,
it's another meaty fish. Yeah, and it has a lot of good flavors and stuff like that. And then once you start showing people and doing dishes for that they'll enjoy, they kind of like that,
and where are
and
you
then you
getting the
become
fish?
fans.
Yeah, you're going down to the docks when the fishermen come
I
in,
don't,
or
I don't do that like David Mangos does. He has the time to do that. I can't do that. But the fishermen I work with, try to work with the fishermen, and then it's you're basically on their cycle. When they go out, if they catch anything, they bring you some. And then the way I do with the snapper, I based on how much business I have for the week, I'll take anywhere from 40 to 100 pounds, and the fish is fresh. And if I get it that night, I won't fillet it. I mean, because I can cook it whole for people, because then it's easier to eat. But then what I'll do is I'll keep it on ice, and I'll go through it the entire week and fillet every day of what I need. And that's the trick.
yeah. And those fishermen know that you're willing to try some new things, so they're going to bring you some
they'll
different
ask
fish.
me. They'll ask me, and they'll say, "Hey, we have kingfish, or we have a wahoo. You want it? I have a bonito. Yes," I said, "I'll take it." The other thing is, sorry, I'm just setting up for a girl. We have kingfish, and then they'll catch a local swordfish. They have what's called slipper lobster. That's here what they call sea lice. It's not a very appealing name, but it's one of the sweetest little lobster. It's a prehistoric looking thing, so it's kind of like funky the way it is. Hold on 1 second, I'm opening the door. Somebody in. So it's one of those things that people get. We get the white sea urchins on here. They call them the white sea eggs, and they're pretty good. And people, but they're very perishable.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to get it and work with it.
Well, do you have a recipe that you would be able to share with the people on our subscription list?
Sure. What in particular are you looking for?
I like to share things that either people might not have tried. I want them to experience food from either from another place, or you just get a sense of what you do. So while I personally would probably lean towards a potato gratin, maybe just another dish that's kind of classic Anguilla to you.
Well, I could do something with Anguilla ingredients and stuff. It's funny that you say that, because it says I'm taking the goat, which I'm doing, and I make shepherd's pie. Cooking that right now. Everyone's like, "Well, why don't you take the bones and make something with it?" I said, "Yeah, on occasion I do." So I said, "You know what? Let me just take the bones, and I'll make what's called a goat water, which everyone likes. It's sort of like a stew."
Huh. That sounds interesting.
Yep. So we're going to see what happens with that, and then I could do something with a fish, or what I do is with the Wilkes escargot that people like.
Yeah, any of those would be, anything that people love that is kind of classically you, that would be great.
And that's something that I can work with. That's easy, and you can use them with Wilkes. You're based out of England, correct?
No, I'm in Texas.
Okay.
Yeah, Cheryl and Richard are in England, or from England.
Okay, sorry, I'm trying to log in. So the Wilkes, I don't know if you can get Wilkes down there in Texas. You might be able to.
But we do have people from all over who are subscribed, so.
Okay, and that's something you can get. And you can do them with like simple stuff, and that's something I can put together for you for like that if you'd like.
That'd be fantastic. And if you happen to have a picture of it after it's made, that would be great too.
Yes, I do. I think we've taken pictures of it numerous times, so it works itself out.
I have pictures of our meal, of course, which was fabulous. But a picture of that recipe would be nice.
Perfect.
Is there anything else I haven't asked that you want to share?
No, just, going right now. We're getting ready for season coming to an end in the next 6 weeks. So we're just kind of winding down. And then as the crowds change, because a lot of people come down in the wintertime are different than what come down in the summertime. So I try to put more things on the menu that caters to them and what they're looking for and stuff like this. It's going to be interesting what's going to go on now in the future, because as of July 1st, they're going to implement the goods and service tax, which is,
Yes.
So, in England, they have the VAT tax, which is inclusive. We'll show it on the bottom. And then, in the States, you have sales tax, but it is kind of a high 13% tax. So couple that with the service charge of 15%, then you're looking at 28% when you sit down. So I think it's going to, change some people's minds about how much they order, what they eat, what they pick at. So.
Well, they need to just plan to have a very special night out at Ember.
Yes, we only hope.
Well, Marc, thank you again. I appreciate it so much. This has been fun. I know
Elaine,
you have things to do.
My pleasure.
It's been fun to
then
talk
just give me a
to
few days, and I'll work on that recipe for you. And it's fun because it utilizes two things which are great down here: pressure cookers and a local product like Welks. And I know you can get them in England. I'm sure you can find them in the stores if they get them for you and stuff like that. So.
Okay, I'll look forward to trying it.
All right, Elaine. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marc. Bye-bye. Well, that was fun. What were your takeaways? Mine are that I'm going to revisit my charcoal grill and not spend so much time with my gas grill. So I'm going to check that out. I'm also going to try some different kinds of fish that I haven't tried before. And apparently I'm going to try escargot. That will be new and different for me. Don't forget to post your recipes and stories on the Cookbook Creative. We always want to highlight the people, places, and stories behind the food. I'll see you next time.